Hey friend, I hope you're doing well. This is going to be the 5th update for my Pan That Palette projects. If you haven't seen my Pan That Palette videos before, I am actually working on 2 palettes this year. One in just the basic traditional style, and that one is ABH Soft Glam. And the second one I am panning in order, and that palette is ABH Norvina. So if you haven't seen my previous updates, I will have my Pan That Palette playlist linked somewhere so that you can check out all of those previous updates if you're interested. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started off with Soft Glam. So here is what Soft Glam is looking like last month. And here is how Soft Glam is looking now. May was not my best month, but I think there are still some pretty notable changes. So we'll just, as usual, go through shade by shade. But I do also want to mention that somebody had asked me in the comments if I would also share the overall uses on each shade instead of just the monthly usage. So I'm going to be doing that. And in addition, I hope this isn't too confusing, and if it is, I'll just drop it for next time. But I actually started tracking my usage on this palette the previous year throughout 2021. 2021 was my first kind of introduction to project panning. So I had started out panning another palette and then added this one as a sort of companion palette. This didn't get a whole lot of usage throughout 2021. My numbers weren't like phenomenal on each individual shade or anything like that, but it did lead me to begin the year with some decent progress to kind of kickstart things. So I already had Pan and Tempera, which obviously is nearly finished now. And then I also had Pan and Cypress Umber, but I'm not actively panning that one. Regardless, there were some dips going and things like that. So I do just want to include the grand total numbers because those uses, however few they are, they have kind of played into the total here of how long it has taken me. Before 2021, I had used this palette every once in a while. There was a period when it was brand new to me that I used it quite a bit, and then it didn't really get a whole lot of use, to be honest with you. So those numbers are pretty indicative of how much it would take to use each shade in total. So if that interests you, then I'll be sharing that today. If that just becomes cumbersome and is not as interesting to you, then I can just move forward with sharing my monthly usage and the number of times I've used it in 2022 from here on out. But for today, we're going to go ahead and start off with Tempera. My goal for Tempera was to use up this bottom left-hand corner, and I was able to do that this month. This month, I used Tempera a total of 10 times. My total number of uses for Tempera in 2022 is 53 uses, and I had used it 32 times in 2021. So that gives me a total of around 87 uses on Tempera in total. My goal moving forward with Tempera is to empty this pan. I'm not sure if I will be able to do it this month, though of course I would love to. But I anticipate that June will be another month where I won't be getting a lot of usage of my makeup just because life is kind of a mess and crazy right now. But I do hope to begin wearing it down quite a bit so that I can finish it up perhaps in July. The next shade in this palette is Glistening. My goal was to focus on this shade during May, but I only was able to use it 2 times throughout the month. I have used Glistening 12 times throughout 2022, and that gives me a total of 22 uses. So I must have used it 10 times in 2021. For as little usage as that is in comparison to Tempera, I feel it is moving along pretty quickly. I'm going to take the month off of using this as a focus shade, but my goal going forward whenever I do use it is just to be expanding pan. Next we have Orange Soda. My goal was to hit pan on Orange Soda this past month, but I only used it 2 times. but I have used it 11 times in 2022, and that gives me a total of 23 uses. So that means that I used it 12 times in 2021. My goal still this month is to hit pan, so this is going to be one of my focus shades for June. It is getting down there to the point that it should be within reach to hit pan, so I'm really hoping that I can do that here soon, and I can imagine that I'll just continue to focus on orange soda once I hit pan. It's just not my favorite shade in this palette, so I'm just wanting to use it up as quickly as possible, and it might take me the entire year to do so since I don't reach for it too often. Next, we have Rose Pink. My goal for this month was to clear out the top half. At the beginning of May, I had just a tiny bit in that upper right hand corner. Now I have made some decent progress in even clearing out the bottom. I used it 5 times this month, and I've used it 23 times in total in 2022. My grand total number on Rose Pink is only 29 uses, so I had only used it a handful of times in 2021, and I think that's especially interesting due to how much progress has been made. It doesn't seem to take a lot of effort to see a lot of movement in this product. My goal for this month again is to be focusing on Rose Pink. I do want to clear out this bottom left-hand corner, and I am going to start working on fully finishing up this pan. I'm interested to see whether that will be done first or tempera. I have actually grown to enjoy Rose Pink. I think I've mentioned a few times that I've started actually just wearing it in the crease, and I find that it's close enough to a satin formula that does work for me. So I will actually be sad to see this go, even though it was one of my least favorite shades in the beginning of this palette. But I'm not going to let the fact that it's a favorite stop me from using it up, and I'm excited about the progress that is being made in Rose Pink. So I think it's kind of fun that Tempera and Rose Pink are kind of in a race toward the end as well. So that will be fun to see how that goes over the course of the next month. Next, we have Sultry, which was another one of my focused shades last month. I used it only 4 times, but that gives me a total of 13 uses in 2022 and 19 in total. So again, I only used it like 6 times in 2021. Sultry is similar to Rose Pink in that when it's blended out, it appears much more like a satin. So Sultry has become one of my favorite shades to use in my kind of like outer V area to give some structure to the eyes. So I'm really loving using Sultry often. However, it is very, very similar in color to Rose Gold in the Norvina palette, which is my focus shade for now. So that has kind of caused Sultry to fall to the wayside. And a little spoiler, I'm guessing that it will continue that way throughout the next month. So even though I had it as a focus shade last time, I'm going to kind of, in my mind, set it aside for another month to focus on Rose Gold a bit more. And then I can kind of return to Sultry after I've hit pan on that shade. Next, we have Bronze, which is the last focus shade in the top row since I am not actively panning Mulberry, Noir, or Cypress Umber. Bronze was meant to be a focus shade for me in the past month, but I only used it 1 time, and that gives me a total of 3 uses in 2022 for a total of 4 uses. So I only used it once in 2021. I do like the way that bronze looks in certain type of bronzy and almost olive leaning eye looks. I just haven't been wearing those types of looks as much recently. This formula also is a bit tricky. Every time I set this palette down, anything other than just like perfectly, very calmly, some of bronze chunks off. And so I've lost quite a bit of product in that pan. It's very loose in there, so I kind of get nervous to be touching it all the time. And for some reason, I have a mental block that just makes it difficult for me to reach for it because I'm afraid of it being messy. That being said, I do want to focus on it in June and I would like to hit pan on it in June. Next up in this palette, we have Dusty Rose, which I used one time this month. I have used Dusty Rose 14 times in 2022, and I apparently only used it once in 2021, so that gives me a total of 15 uses. This is a shade that I know I reached for quite often throughout the past few years, not just from 2021 onward, because it's one of my favorites in this palette, so I probably have quite a bit more than just 15 uses on it. That being said, I have kind of been neglecting Dusty Rose over the past couple of years because it is probably my favorite shade in this palette. I love it so much that I'm planning to get a single from ABH after I finish this palette. So I'm not focusing on Dusty Rose at the moment, but I'm going to have to start probably pretty soon. I'm hoping to get a bit more progress in some of these warm brown mattes before moving on to Dusty Rose, but I may have no choice if I want to finish it up this year. But for now, frankly, I'm fine with just neglecting it for the sake of keeping it around for a bit longer. Next, we have Fairy, which was also meant to be a focus shade for me last month, but I used it only 2 times. I've used Fairy 8 times in 2022 for a total of 11 uses. Fairy, again, I think I've shared before, it's not my favorite shade. I am beginning to consider making some changes to this palette. I'm not sure yet, so like no promises here, but I've been considering maybe frankening Fairy with something else, deepen it up a little bit to make it maybe more of one of those satins that I could use in the crease, similarly to Rose Pink and Sultry. We'll see. That's something that I'm considering. For now, I can't force myself to focus on Fairy for another month, so I'm going to be mentally setting that one aside as well. I will have to return to it later on this summer. Next up is Burnt Orange. This is another one of my favorite shades in this palette, and I used it 3 times over the course of the past month. I have used Burnt Orange 25 times in 2022 for a total of 32 uses. I don't have a whole lot of problem with continuing to reach for Burnt Orange even when it's not a focus shade, so I am fine with the amount of progress that I have. It's one of my favorites in this palette, so I'm fine with not just rushing to use it up. However, I'm getting nervous. I'm getting nervous about the mattes in this palette, so I'm going to have to make some decisions soon about whether or not I am okay with leaving some of the mattes unfinished and pushing them off to the end of the year to focus on the ones that I want to be sure to get done. Yeah, if you have any thoughts on that too, let me know. But we're going to go another month without Burnt Orange being one of those focus shades for me. Next is Sienna, which was meant to be another focus shade, but I only used it 1 time over the course of the past month. I have used Sienna 14 times in total in 2022, and I apparently again only used it 1 time in 2021 because I have only 15 uses on it in total. Sienna is probably the matte that I'm most worried about in this palette. It's not the one that I gravitate to naturally, and because it's deeper, it's even more difficult to incorporate than Orange Soda. So I'm going to be focusing specifically on Sienna this month. I have included less focus shades, which I don't know why I did that before, but now we're going to have only a few focus shades to be intentionally working on. And I'm hoping that that might allow me to see some more progress. I really would like to begin expanding pan. The pan, it wasn't intentionally this way, but it has kind of turned into a bit of like a tunnel pan situation. So I would like to begin kind of working down the outer parts of the pan as well, so that there will be more like even distribution of usage happening. I'm hoping that that might help progress to move along in the future so that I do have a better chance of finishing up this focus shade during this year. So I'm planning to just kind of force myself to focus on sienna for now and to try to incorporate it a bit more frequently and hopefully see some good progress. And finally, the last shade that I am planning to pan in this palette is Rustic. It was another one of my focus shades this past month and I used it 3 times. I've used Rustic 21 times in 2022 for a total of 28 uses. Rustic is another one of my favorites in this palette and it pairs really well with bronze. So I'm planning to use it a bit this month, but it's not going to be one of my sole focus shades. But that's another one that I'm worried about. It's one of my favorite mattes, so I'm hoping that I can finish it up this year. But just because the pan is so small, I am getting a bit anxious about that one as well. So we'll see how Sienna goes this month, and then I might turn my focus to Rustic. So my focus shades out of Soft Glam for this month are going to be Tempera, because I would like to focus and try to finish it this month. Then Orange Soda, I would like to hit pan. Rose Pink to at least clear out this bottom left hand corner and maybe try to finish it up. Then Bronze to try to hit pan. And then finally Sienna to try to expand the pan. So here is my color story all swatched out. Some of these shades are getting a bit difficult to swatch now, but I am actually kind of excited about this color story. Hopefully with a fewer number of focus shades, I can see a bit more progress going on. And now we can move on to Norvina. So here's what Norvina was looking like last month. And here's how Norvina is looking now. I'm guessing it looks pretty much the same. I at least don't see a whole lot of progress happening in Rose Gold. I've used Rose Gold only 3 times over the course of the past month. I was kind of having Rose Gold and Sultry compete a bit, so hopefully this month I can focus solely on Rose Gold and begin to see a bit more progress. They're very similar in color. Rose Gold is just more impactful in the shimmer. That makes Rose Gold very fun, but because it's a more impactful kind of metallic formula, it's going to be slow moving just like Summer was. I think it's even more difficult because it's a bit darker. I didn't anticipate at the beginning of this year making any changes with my approach to panning this palette, but it has been a bit slow moving. So I am considering a change in my rules starting in July. I think I've talked about this a few times, but I do have a kind of overarching rule for my project pan that I will use July as kind of a refresh time. So in keeping with the July refresh theme, I may kind of rethink how I'm going to approach this palette. Because this is a pan that palette in order project, I do want to still keep with the theme, but what I'm considering is to be panning the bottom row along with the top row. So beginning in July then, I would begin working on base, and just as I am working through the top row, would begin working through the bottom row of mattes. So you can let me know if you think that that would be interesting to watch, if that would be any different of an experience for you. It would just mean that there are 2 focus shades in this palette. If, say, I was going to start this now, I would be focusing on Rose Gold and base at the same time. If by next month I have hit pan on Rose Gold, then I would be working on Celestial and base. Once I finish up the top row, I could either go back to just one focus while I work through the bottom row, or I could allow myself to work on 2 at a time, but try to make sure that I'm only hitting pan on the one that comes first. So if you have any opinions and any thoughts on what you think about those proposed changes in the rules, I would love to hear your feedback. Please let me know what you think. We'll see what I come up with before July, but that is kind of what I'm thinking at this point, just to help this move along a bit quicker. For now though, I am going to swatch rose gold along with the rest of my color story so that we can see everything together. Okay, so there is my color story for this month swatched out all together. I think everything is pretty cohesive. I do think these colors will pair really well with the Metropolis palette, which I have included in my Graveyard Project pan. And I think that some shades in the Divine Rose palette by Pat McGrath will also pair well with these. Hopefully we will see some good progress on this smaller color story, but that's everything. So thank you so much for watching. I also will have my general Project Pan playlist linked somewhere in case you would like to keep up with the rest of my projects. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope to see you in the next one.